I think it's pretty common knowledge now because you've mentioned it before that the first thing that you worked on with them was patriotism. Was there like a vibe um with that song particularly, or was or were you around them enough at that time where you were just like, oh, this is just what they do now? Like was it a different vibe from what you were feeling from them before?
Well, again, like I literally, and look, I've done the same thing. Like, you know, when those guys show up to do patriotism, they didn't know whether I was going to be there for 5 minutes or 5 years. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like we had a connection or a vibe at the time because
Right.
they didn't know who I was. You know what I mean? Len was probably more personable at first. I remember going to get lunch with him and us shooting the shit. But like, um, yeah, I mean, it was new. It was new to everybody, and I wasn't particularly surprised at like the quality of that song or the subject matter or anything like that. It didn't shock. It's kind of what I expected. Again, I was like a big fan, and I was a big fan of End to End Burners, which was, you know, kind of like their big hit and their most recent song with vocals on it. So, and if you listen to End to End and then Patriotism, there's not a huge jump. You know what I mean? Like they're both in the same vein.
Right.
Um, and I will say that, like a lot of L stuff at the time, we recorded an entire version of Patriotism that is on a totally different beat. Um, you know, and then he basically took it home and must have immediately made a new beat because it was like we were back in the studio to mix the next morning, noon. We were back in the studio to mix what we had recorded the previous day
Over the
and
original beat.
over the original beat. And the original beat was a baseline driven beat. But it was like this offbeat bass, well, off kilter bass line. And I just remember it had like that, like every one or two, it had like this double clutch of like it was like, and it like would carry through. God only knows if that even exists anyway. If it does, it's probably on like a fucking 8-at or a DA88 that is might as well be like an alien object because nobody can play those anymore. But yeah, so anyway, the next day he came back first thing in the morning with the beat for Patriotism. The real beat, the beat that came out commercially. And obviously redropped the vocals because that beat was drastically different. It might have even been a different it's not like he remixed it and redropped it. Like I think it was a different BPM and everything. And and then it went from there. Obviously there were things added, I suppose, probably the way that the cuts were done, or maybe the way the left right stuff was done was probably done differently, or maybe only created after the new beat was there because that's what sparked that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, it was a pretty amazing session. But also remember, like, part of the reason why, at least I think from my memory, part of the reason why he thought about that as heavily as he did is because that was for Sound Bombing 2, I think.
Yeah, it was for
And
Sound too.
Sound Bombing 2 was mixed as it was a mixtape, technically. It was sold as an album, but it was kind of marketed and assembled like a mixtape, which was what people did in the 90s, which is kind of weird. I was never like crazy about that, but it worked for Sound Bombing, certainly. And I forgot who the DJ was. I think it was Babu, if I remember right. I don't remember who the DJ was. But the point of it is that L was concerned that, like, what he was doing had to fit in a mix, you know, and the original beat was like so off kilter that I think there was some concern that it would be hard for like a DJ to blend it, in and out of another song that would have been contributed. So that's how Patriotism ended up sounding more the way it does.